All right, so the next section talks about errors. Errors while writing programs are absolutely normal. Every programmer, experienced programmers, you could be programming for 40 years, you'll make errors. It's just absolutely inevitable. So the important thing is not to have some kind of way of programming where you never make errors. That doesn't happen. The important thing is to track down where the error is. And there is support for this. So we start off with the editor. The editor tries to warn you about errors using a very subtle little icon on the left-hand side. So let's just do that. We'll go back to our world. I'm going to get rid of the music because it'll just annoy us at this point. So the first line of defense is the editor trying to spot us making an error. Now the editor can't spot everything, but let's have a look. We type in some kind of nonsense here and a X develops on the left-hand side of the editor. You see the X there? So we can hover on the X and the editor is trying to make some sense of the nonsense I've been typing, and it can't. Now, the editor's error messages could be quite cryptic. That's the nature of the trying to figure out what the user is doing. But the point is, at least the editor is catching a syntax error in JavaScript. Now, let's say you didn't see that X, which is quite easy to miss, especially because it scrolls off screen as you go down, you see. I've gone down and I didn't see the X, now it's gone. You have to actually be on the line or close to the line, it has to be on the screen in order to see that X. So if I press save, what happens? Well, what happens is it picks up that there was a problem with the editor and it says world saved but may not run. So, okay, it is saved but may not run. If I get rid of the errors, the X vanishes and then save won't complain, it'll just save. Now, there are certain things. For example, if I type the name of a function that doesn't exist, that's the name of a function that doesn't exist, the editor can't see a syntax error. It thinks that's okay because the editor doesn't do a checking of all functions that may or may not exist in all the libraries that I'm using. It's just checking basic syntax. So when I press save, everything's fine. But when I run, what will happen? I think I get a blank screen. And so I don't know if you know anything about JavaScript, but there's a thing called the JavaScript console. And in the JavaScript console, you can actually see where the error is. So let's just go back to the tutorial and see what it's saying. It says the editor warns you about errors. When you save the file, you're warned again. Some errors cannot be detected in the editor. That's important. You only find out when you run the program. If there are errors when you run the program, they may be displayed in the JavaScript console, which is F12 in some browsers. I'm on Chrome, it's Control-Shift-J. So here's my run page. If I press Control-Shift-J, it says this is not defined, this thing here. So it doesn't recognize that function name. So it's actually telling me where the error is and even the line number, I think. So there is a multi-stage apparatus for detecting errors. There are more subtle errors that maybe all of those things won't be able to detect, but it's important to know how the system supports error detection. So the next section is documentation, and there's a lot of help, there's a lot of documentation. See the docs menu for all the documentation you need when coding. So above we saw a couple of things. We saw AB random int and AB background music. That's perhaps easier to understand. There's some kind of function which gives us background music, and it's got AB in front of it, standing for ancient brain. So there's a whole load of these functions, and they're all kind of underneath AB. They all begin with AB dot something. So there is documentation on AB in AB docs. So if I'm in the editor here, for example, and I go to docs, that's this menu item here is the AB docs. So I click there, and it leaves my editor there, by the way, and opens separately to the editor to protect the editor. And there's a whole bunch of things in AB, but if we just look at there we go, background music. So we can start off background music and give it a file, and there's all sorts of things that we can do that are built in. We can also use what's built into JavaScript, of course, and we can also use what's built into P5 because this world is using the P5 library. And then there's another thing that we can use, which is built into the API that we're using. So there's a bunch of different APIs, and you can follow the link to see what an API is. But basically, it's how much support you want for your world on Ancient Brain. You can have a whole load of libraries, you can have very few libraries, you can have cameras built in and draggable with the mouse, or you can roll it all yourself. So sometimes when you're porting things, you don't want to have a whole bunch of libraries. You want to be able to port just the raw code that you found somewhere else from some other site, assuming you have permission to port it. And other times you want as much support as you can get in terms of libraries and functionality. So that's what the APIs are about. And every world uses a particular API, and this one uses one which gives it some things called full width and full height. There's more ways of getting help. Select code in the editor and press Intelligent Code Help. So I'm over here in the editor. So I'm wondering what create canvas is. So I just select that and I press Code Help here, or Alt-I. And what it does is it tries to figure out what help page to give you. Should it give you an Ancient Brain help page? Should it give you a generic JavaScript help page, or a P5 help page? And what it does actually here is it gives you a P5 help page, because it's figured out that create canvas is a P5 function. And this works pretty well. So it should get you the relevant help page. So that tells you how to create the canvas using P5. If I go to abworlds.fullwidth and do code help, it sends me to the help page for the API that I'm using on Ancient Brain. And that API defines things like full width and full height. So pretty much everything you see, including in other people's code, if you're cloning other people's code and looking at what they're doing, you can select the terms, do the Intelligent Code Help. It's got Alt-I as well as a shortcut. And so let's just do an Alt-I. There we go. For rotate X, Alt-I, and it goes over to P5. So you could do the Intelligent Code Help on all the code that you find on Ancient Brain. Okay, so the next section is clone and edit other P5 worlds. If we're moving beyond the comfort of the starter world, we should look at other starter P5 worlds. So starter worlds for this API. So if I click on that, we get starter worlds for P5. So there's our friend, OneCube World. That's what we started with. And there's a bunch of other starter worlds here. Doing various things. Some are kind of two-dimensional, some are kind of 3D. You can also look at all starter worlds, and this goes through all the APIs and gives you an idea of what you can do in each API. So here's the basic 3.js API, and you can already see there's some pretty cool graphics there. Then we have the physics API, which is built on 3.js. Then we have an initial P5 API. It's not actually the one we're using, and there's a reason for that. It's to do, well, I might as well tell you, we're using a very bare bones P5 API, which has very little support from Ancient Brain. The reason being that P5 normally has its own clock. That was the draw function. And in the APIs with lots of Ancient Brain support, the clock is all built in, and Ancient Brain manages the clock for you. So that may not be what you want with a P5 world. It almost certainly, or quite likely, is what you want with a 3JS world, but not necessarily with the P5 worlds. So there's only 25 worlds in this P5 API with Ancient Brain support. So we just look at the other one further down. This is where you don't want any support. You don't want any graphics libraries. You can do all the graphics yourself. Then we have an API for 3.js with no support, no Ancient Brain support, and the physics one, not going to be too popular. But the P5 with no Ancient Brain support will be popular because the Ancient Brain clock would get in the way of the P5 clock. So probably with the P5, you want to have no Ancient Brain help at all. Just do the P5 clock and the regular P5 draw and setup functions. Then for completeness, there's no graphics library, no Ancient Brain support. You can't do much with that. It's like assembly language programming. And then you have, for completeness, you can just have a web page as well, which is no graphics at all and no canvas involved. So they're the APIs with their starter worlds. And what might you look at next? You might look for a section of code called the tweaker's box at the top. So the idea of the tweaker's box is it's things you can change without really being an advanced programmer. So with our cube world, there were things like the object size and the angle rotation we could change without being a programmer at all, basically. Okay, so the last bit in the tutorial is to show it off. In other words, to show your world running on a mobile, on PCs, because your program, as soon as you press save, is on the internet. It's like publishing a video to YouTube. Everyone can now see it, and you can show it off wherever you are. Let's go and find our world again, and let's go search for my world. So there's my world, and I go onto my world. Now, the thing about my world is it's got the original boring blue cube, but actually the world is much more interesting than that now. So what I want to do is update that image so that it actually illustrates what the world looks like now. So it's pretty easy to do that because there's a big button here. So let's just update the image and see how it goes. So new image, it does a run, and during the run, it takes a snapshot of what's going on. So that snapshot is going to be accurate. So it says world image updated on server, and if I reload this page, there we go. So now anybody can Google Ancient Brain, go to the home page, search in worlds for Wonderful or whatever you called your world, and there we go. They get a picture of, an accurate picture of what your world is. They can click immediately on it and run it. Okay, so we can find our worlds. As the last section is pointing out here, the site works on mobile, so you can show it off just casually to people on a mobile. And for some worlds, touch will actually drag the camera about. So you can try it, especially with those Three.js worlds. Touch on mobile and tablets will move the camera, and you can interact with worlds through touch as well. People can find your world, so give it a good name. You can embed your world in another website. So if I go here to the homepage for the worlds, there's a whole bunch of ways of embedding it. You can embed it where it runs in a little frame. You can embed it where when you click on it, it starts a new window. And you can embed it where it automatically runs in a little frame. And there's no click. As soon as the web page loads, the Ancient Brain world starts running inside the little or perhaps quite big iframe on your own website. So you can embed all these like YouTube videos on other websites. You can comment on other people's worlds, and there's all sorts of other functionality. You can go look in features. So that pretty much shows you how to code, how to share your code, how to look at other people's code, how to search, how to get help.